Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff meeting for the Landslide Early Warning System Data Working Group. It's part of LandAware. Thank you all for being here, whatever time zone you're in. Can everyone see the screen? Or Dahlia, can you see the screen I've shared?
That's great.
Okay. Just quick, since we have too many people to go around the room and introduce, Dahlia has just put a link in the chat for a little Google Docs survey with your name, information. You don't need to include your email if you don't want to. We have that anyway, but just to repeat that we wanted to kind of keep track of who all is here, and also there'll be some room to put your input in later on as we get through a little bit of the discussion. We weren't sure exactly how many people would show up, and so we weren't sure how we were going to facilitate discussion. I think given the number of people, if you have something you'd really like to chime in, please put that in the chat, and Dahlia is monitoring that, and she'll read your comments, and we'll have some time for open discussion as well, but just to keep things moving along. Okay, so I'm Ben Mears, the U.S. Geological Survey. You probably all also know Dahlia Kirschbaum at NASA, and this Landslide Data Working Group. Our goal is really to promote open data and sharing of information that can be useful for model development, parameterization, or evaluation of landslide early warning systems. And just, oh, my slides are not advancing. Just as an overview of today, Dahlia sent around a agenda, but just to kind of even in more brief, we're going to overview of the working group focus, review some of the main objectives and products that we'd like to develop, and have a little bit of open discussion and talk about some of the logistics for some of our future activities, since this is a kickoff. So this has got some weird, let me just put them all up there, thank you. Our motivation is, well, we have kind of four main objectives that we'd like to accomplish, and Dahlia, chime in here if I'm missing something. But first and foremost, conduct a review of all the data needs and opportunities for landslide warning system. This is constantly evolving. There are new approaches and new data streams that are coming in. We'd like to have kind of just a review of what exists, what the advances are, and what kind of some of the challenges and needs might be moving forward. Identify and assemble some possible benchmark data sets, and we'll get into this, but really in a lot of different other modeling communities, there are an established set of benchmark data sets that people can use to test their models against to make sure that they're getting the right performance statistics, things like that. And so we'd like to consider something like that for landslide early warning systems. We're not aware of something like that that's happened in the past. Third, develop a centralized repository or place with metadata or inventory metadata so that you know, in the U.S. here, we have a lot of data sharing requirements working for the federal government, but internationally, there's kind of a whole disparate range of data sharing requirements, and we'd like to at least provide an opportunity or a forum for open data sharing so that people can use global data sets for landslide early warning system development. And then last, but hopefully we'll get started on today, is provide some forum for discussion and of applications, knowledge gaps, etc., like that, and maybe hopefully develop some long-term collaborations between different members of LandAware. Dahlia, have I missed anything?
Nope, those are the main motivations. I think, you know, just to pull back to the big picture, you know, this is one of the working groups that's part of the LandAware network, which is a consortium, a group of people from around the world that are contributing their expertise to both learn about landslide early warning systems, contribute their understanding and maybe data, information, with the hope of really expanding this network. And so I know we have some of the founding members on. I'll cold call on Mikael, who really started this effort, just to see if he has anything he would maybe want to, you know, talk about in terms of the bigger picture. So, Mikael, would you like? I didn't give him any.
Really, Dalia, because this is the meeting of the working group, so no, you're running the show. So I'm here as you know, an observer, really. So like, please go ahead. If they are here, people know about the network, so it's not. Let's not take time with that. Thanks.
Okay. So the goal, as we said, you know, we're specifically focused on data and how we can bring this to bear in a communal setting to really advance the topic of landslide early warning. And so, you know, there are three main topics that we would like to cover in terms of kind of organizing our working group into maybe sub-working groups. And so, you know, just to, as you're listening to this and hopefully engaging, we really want this to be an active group. We really want you to engage, to provide your ideas, to share information you think might be relevant to the group, so that we can create a network that really advances some of this work. So I think we can go to the next slide. You know, the first, the first topic has been introduced is data needs and opportunities. And as we know, you know, these can be organized into several different areas. So this can be inventories, which really are, as you know, foundational to advancing landslide early warning systems. And you know, these can include event-based inventories, multi-temporal inventories, you know, either from media reports or other sources, and then static maps, which have also other purposes. For data, we're talking about, you know, data for model development. Those could include rainfall products, both in situ, so from rain gauges or radar, and then also from satellite data. And then there's a range, of course, of hydrologic products, soil moisture from both in situ sensors and satellite-based, and then land cover and land use information. Again, many of these can be derived from satellites. I'm biased coming from NASA, but I think that, you know, understanding the interplay between both ground-based sources of information and more remote sources is also an important discussion point for this group. And then I think lastly, in terms of open questions related to landslide early warning system models, you know, one of the questions we have is, what data do you need for what scale of model? And that really can vary quite broadly in terms of how you evaluate your model, how do you parameterize it, and what data might be sufficient for that type of system. How often these models are run, or and so I think that really speaks to, again, the data needs and requirements. And then, of course, system requirements. You know, what infrastructure needs need to be in place. What are the stakeholder priorities to really take this information and make decisions about saving lives, saving property, and protecting people. And so I think that, you know, one of the goals of this effort, just to highlight these different types of data, is that we would like to work with you to really start to understand how different types of data may be used within this framework, with the goal of ultimately, you know, potentially producing a white paper that really highlights the trade-offs between this type of information. And many of these types of papers have existed, but I think that, you know, Ben and I feel that this is an opportunity to really codify, to really help us understand, you know, how and what types of data are useful to support landslide early warning systems. So the first big topic is data needs. I'm going to pitch it back to Ben.
Yeah, I think really just to build off what Dahlia said, and again, we're going to have some opportunity for a little bit of discussion later, but I think what we've all probably experienced is that when we're developing a landslide warning system or a threshold or whatever, is we're using the data that we have for the particular area where we're working. And I think that this working group is an opportunity to go beyond that and have some opportunity for comparison across sites, looking at what all data is out there, what other data are other people using in their data for landslide warning system. And that ties back to the stakeholder system requirements, all this stuff, is that ultimately if we're engaging with stakeholders and the working group on communicating with stakeholders, that sometimes it's important to communicate data needs to them as well. And so having this kind of reference point is, we hope, incredibly valuable in that front. So to go to the next topic, which maybe will be not the main focus of this working group, but I think an important subset is having some benchmark data sets or identifying some data sets and some, in particular, certain criteria for data sets that would allow objective comparison of different landslide warning system modeling approaches. There's more and more approaches being developed. And again, everyone's working with their own data set for their own particular problem. But there isn't a kind of a set of benchmark standards, and without that can't really be developed without a set of benchmark data sets. And so we'd like to consider a range of possible geographic and hydroclimatic settings, identify some that can be used for globally landslide early warning system development, so that we're representing, again, the range of potential rainfall triggered landslide situations. And also, kind of in terms of future development of landslide warning systems, that with these benchmark data sets is a way for people to test their own approach and see is their approach working, and should they expect it to work? We haven't fully identified the data standards and criteria for inclusion. Kind of depends a little bit on what comes forward, and we'd like to discuss that. But ultimately, having some metadata that's robust and complete, having some requirement for the spatial and temporal resolution and accessibility of the data that will allow everyone to get a hold of a handful of benchmark data sets to test their approaches against their own database. Anything else missing there? Okay. I'll kick it back to you now, Dalia. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. And so just to go back, so the first kind of topic that we identified was data needs and opportunities, and really a review of what we're doing. The second, as we said, was this benchmark data sets. And then the third component is this concept of a central data repository. But I think that that's a pretty amorphous idea right now, and it's one that we really want to work with you all on to figure out how to kind of hone it. And so rather than kind of having bullet points of what we think it should be, I think we have bullet points on what you think it should be. We know that through other examples. I know Hakan Tanyas is on, and he's been working quite extensively in the past with seismically triggered landslide databases and identifying and pulling those together. And so how about for rainfall triggered landslide inventories and for kind of other types of inventories? We have some different systems that have, are a prototype or what have you that we could speak more about. But I think fundamentally, what should a repository look like? What are the benefits of this? What are the incentives for sharing open data, which is something that Ben and I very much hope is kind of on the forefront of this topic, is sharing an open data where possible. But then ultimately, what do we want to accomplish? What should it just be a repository of metadata, or should it be an actual repository of information or a mixture? And I think all of those are open questions because we haven't prescribed an answer. So, what we wanted to do now is we wanted to hear from you in terms of what you might be interested in. And so we're going to do this in two ways. So the first is I'm going to send the link to the Google Drive again. But for those that have joined recently, we'd love for you to put in your information in the orange section of this Google spreadsheet. But then the blue section, so that's columns D through G, if you are interested in participating in any of these three we're calling sub-working groups, please indicate it. And if you would like to lead any of these efforts, because the hope is that Ben and I aren't leading any of them, please indicate that. And then as you are going through this, again, indicate your interest. You can do one or many. And if you're observer, that's fine. You don't have to participate in any sub-working groups, but we encourage your interest. And then also, if you have other comments or ideas, this is column H, please include them here. But I think now, we're really hoping to get input from the group because we've done quite a bit of talking, and the goal of this is to hear feedback. And so, as you're filling out the Google spreadsheet, I'd like to invite people to raise their hands, and we can call on you. I think everybody should be able to unmute. But raise your hand if you have any thoughts about what we've presented thus far, and then we have some questions kind of to engage the group in a different way. So any thoughts here on any of the topics we've brought up this far, benchmark data sets, data needs, etc. Please raise your hand. Alessandro.
Yeah, ciao. Well, I have a quick comment, actually. I think we're missing one point because we are discussing about data and models, but in between, we should define the process we wanted to forecast. Because different, well, I'm not an expert in, but different processes need different models. And models work at different scales and things like that. So there's a connection in between models and data, and this is given by the the process you wanted to forecast. Rockfalls, debris flow, debris slide are completely different processes, and they require different data and different models. That's my comment starting on.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. Ben, do you want to comment on that?
No, thanks for that. I think that I'd kind of been going from the assumption that we were, looking at rainfall triggered shallow landslide is the area that I work in. But, certainly there are lots of different warning systems, and the data types needed for those vary highly. And actually, especially when you start thinking about larger scale and explaining to stakeholders, they don't always understand the difference between a debris flow and a rockfall. Well, debris flow and a rockfall, maybe yes, but that there are different types of failure processes that are going to have very different data needs. So yeah, I appreciate that very much, and that's maybe something we ought to consider in terms of benchmark data sets.
Absolutely. Adityan?
Sorry, so as much as the processes involve the geotechnical properties, when I tried to model regional based landslides for the Indian scenario, the major drawback that I found was the availability of geotechnical properties on a regional scale, and the scale of the geotechnical properties. If it's in a large scale, I mean, if you are looking at it for a full state, or you're looking at it for a specific sites, or you're looking at it for one or two landslides. If it is rainfall induced landslides, then it's a different case. If it's earthquake induced landslides, then the rock falls are more prominent, and based on that, we need to prioritize the kind of geotechnical properties that we need to prioritize. And for these geotechnical properties, the models slope stability models, or are we looking at more of a machine learning models? I don't know. I mean, those are some things that we'll have to look at. That's one thing that I would like to say. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I think geotechnical properties are always a challenge, especially with broader regions. So, defining kind of the availability or the gaps in those areas and where that could inform different types of modeling efforts is something that we hope we can explore with that first white paper approach, really summarizing kind of the opportunities, the gaps, and the current availability of information.
Yeah. That's potentially a bottomless pit in terms of the amount of geotechnical properties that need to be characterized globally. And I think Dahlia and I have been working from the assumption that we were looking at, I guess there are many different landslide early warning system models, and I've worked across the spectrum of those, from deterministic using modeling based approaches to or physically based modeling approaches to kind of more statistical. And I think we've been looking at the kind of broader scale of, well, what's the minimal data you need for a warning system? But certainly if you're looking at landslide initiation modeling from a physically based perspective, there's a lot of information that would be needed. So maybe this is a question for the broader group. Is there a need to identify those properties globally or databases globally as well? Maybe we need a separate sub-working group for that. I think that amount of information is really staggering how much we still don't know. So I appreciate you pointing that out. Thank you.
And then to go to Corey.
Yeah, thanks, Delia. Yeah, no, I definitely support the what's been brought up by the last couple speakers. I'm actually in the process right now of we have a group of clients across North America, all the way up from the Canadian Arctic over to where Dahlia is in the eastern U.S. that are all based on regulatory requirements asking for landslide early warning thresholds and systems to be developed. And areas where we have permafrost, glaciated terrain, big slow-moving landslides that accumulate strain versus shallow, steep creek, steep slope hazards. And so those are, again, when we're thinking about warning and early warning and data, the impact of soil moisture and thermal change is going to be differing based on all those areas. So that'll be important to understand. But also then, thinking about then what sort of data collection is meaningful. I've just reviewed work where colleagues have gone in and looked at pipeline ruptures and set timing around those. But pipelines accumulate strain over years, over decades, and it might not be a specific event. So, you know, my feedback to them is there is not a correlation here, and you need to look deeper. So, the other thing we also need to think about, and again, informs what data is meaningful, are the different ways that landslide early warning is used. Some organizations like governments look longer term future climate scenarios and how things may change versus an operational within hours I need to be on a site, and everything in between. So, but all of that understanding for what landslide early warning is should influence, you know, when we think about what sort of data is meaningful. And again, not, as Ben said, wanting to go like into this endless level of detail.
Right.
We can't do that. But, you know, across those various slope processes and regions, yeah, what is meaningful? And I don't know the answer right now, but I'm thinking about it right now. So thank you.
That's really valuable, Corey. Thanks. And I think that highlights the need, as we mentioned in the benchmark data sets, to come up with a range of not just geographic settings, but also type of slope stability assessment. So, you know, from a big slow moving landslide that might, the warning system might just be getting ready to have trucks on hand to remove the dirt that comes out onto a road versus, long-term planning for climate change or, thermokarst, or of course the kind of more standard shallow landslide and debris flow early warning systems that are used for evacuations and whatnot. So perhaps that Dahlia, we can add that in the ideas related to benchmark data sets, that we need to have a spectrum of slope failure types and what the warning systems are potentially used for, so that folks can really have a reference point for where to go when they're building their own warning system across many different settings.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think another point here that actually John brought up in the chat as well is that, we tend to kind of think of it from our perspective, so more of an academic research perspective, but in terms of the operational application, the LandAware network already has individuals from private companies, from consulting firms, from operational centers that are needing this, are hoping to develop early warning systems for their city, for their municipality, or beyond. And so I think that the application of these systems is going to be really important in terms of the data needed to inform them. And so we want to make sure we, think broadly in terms of who the users are and who even the developers are for these systems, and what data they may have access to or not. I think Alessandro, another comment?
Yeah. It's just about this, because we're implementing an early warning system in India for a couple of areas, and actually, what we call an early warning system is not just like the landslide forecast model. So it's actually the preparation of a bulletin, which includes also data like institutional mapping and things like that. So when we say landslide early warning system, we are meaning the landslide forecast model or the entire structure, including the preparation of the bulletin and things like that, because that includes a long list of other data.
That's an excellent point. I think we need to further define that. This is the first meeting of this group, and so I actually think that this is a great segue into kind of engaging the group on the slide that you see now, which is really getting your thoughts on this. When we say landslide early warning systems, are we talking about end-to-end systems? Are we talking about just the actual modeling? Are we talking about machine learning versus deterministic? I think that there's a lot of questions in there. And so the way that we're hoping to do this is twofold. One is you're always welcome to raise your hand and share a thought. But given there's so many and we weren't sure how many would have thoughts that they wanted to articulate and or just write, if you go back to the spreadsheet, and I'm just going to keep sending that link, the green section of the spreadsheet, if you follow over from your name, has these questions, and we really would like to hear from you. Again, if you aren't interested or don't feel like you have something to contribute now, this sheet will stay open. But the idea is to address these questions. The first is, and as we started talking about, what are the main data limitations for LEWS development, landslide early warning system development and improvement? For my work, what the perpetual challenge is open and accessible landslide inventories, and with timing information. But that is just one of many challenges. And so, we invite you to share your thoughts on that. The second question is about knowledge gaps that can be addressed more effectively together. So, how are we identifying the relationships between, the temporal resolution and performance, or how well do satellite products compare to in situ data for landslide early warning system performance? And then the third question is, what would be beneficial in terms of data or infrastructure for the community? One of the thoughts that Ben and I had as we were chatting prior to this meeting is, one of the focuses I'd like to see is how can we expand the network of available quality inventories, and what does quality mean? And by having benchmark data sets that the community can agree or can work on as kind of standards for high quality inventories, whatever that means, is that a way to kind of have a benchmark that we then can evaluate future machine learning models to evaluate, rapid detection of landslides, or retrospective analysis using remote sensing data? So I think I'm going to just leave those questions up and just kind of kick it over to Ben to see if he has any additional clarifications on that and on those questions and requests for answers.
Yeah, thanks, Dahlia. And again, thanks for everyone for your feedback in advance. Anyone who's writing, I recognize it's different time zone for everyone. So some people may be eating dinner or putting the kids to bed. So it's that link will stay open for a while. But these questions that we have right up, and Dahlia kind of acknowledged, we're kind of coming from the more academic standpoint. And so I'm really happy to see some folks that are having a little bit more operational experience in the chat and in the meeting, and we'd really value your input, and whether that's at any stage of this, the kind of well-developed idea we have of putting together a data review paper, or kind of the benchmark data sets, or kind of more open-ended question of what will this centralized repository look like, and we'd like to be building towards all these objectives together. But yeah, I think ultimately the contributions that anyone's putting there in the chat will hopefully try to incorporate, or in the spreadsheet, we'll try to incorporate into this initial review paper, and we'll be seeking feedback from you in advance of getting that together. So I think it seems like kind of the in-person discussion. I see Alessandro's raised his hand again.
I don't know if you put it down.
Okay.
But do other people have thoughts or that they'd like to share? Please raise your hand. We'd be happy to hear them. Otherwise, please put your thoughts in the chat, because in the spreadsheet, because I think that's going to be really, really important to capture as we further define this. Because from all the comments we've had thus far and what we're seeing in the Google spreadsheet, it is really important to highlight those. And then a third option, if you're a little shy in giving feedback, is you're welcome to email us. We'll make sure to put our emails in the chat. Any thoughts you have on this as well, and we can capture them anonymously. So Ben, you want to take over, kind of, again, feel free to interrupt with raising hands. Otherwise, we can talk a bit more about logistics, timelines, and our thoughts of, plans and what this working group could be.
Yeah, I just kind of put this slide up next to start thinking about moving forward. We didn't know how long we would need for this meeting, or how much people wanted to have in-person discussion. I see Corey has a comment, and you're welcome to chime in at any point. We can maybe have more discussion towards the end here. But what we'd like to do, at least, so the next steps, Dahlia and I are going to incorporate whatever comes into that Google spreadsheet over the next few weeks, and get back to everyone with some thoughts. And in particular, we're going to have monthly meetings to just keep the discussion going with associates and active members. We also recognize that there's a lot of different working groups, and some people may not want to be involved in monthly meetings. You've got enough Zoom obligations these days. And so we're going to have quarterly updates for observers and inactive members. And just so that we can really, the people who are going to be actively contributing, we'd really like to keep the conversation going, and also pull as much expertise out of you. And so that's, again, what Dahlia said. We'd like to be facilitating this, but not leading all of everything. And lastly, so just kind of timeline-wise, we hope to disseminate that white paper sometime in 2022. So we've got a full year or maybe two to work on that, depending on how many ideas and people come together for this. And then work towards in 2023 having some kind of a centralized repository with some of those benchmark data sets in that. So again, the products are identifying some benchmark data sets, this review paper, and establishing a centralized repository. And I think one of the big questions is we don't really know where or how the centralized repository might be hosted. And so we'd like to kind of, again, get feedback from people about if that would be useful, how you'd like to access it, and what kind of the incentives would be for being involved in that. So I see Corey's got a comment in the chat. It would be a first step to tighten up in terms of reference for the group and tasks, then cross-reference with the other working groups, as there will likely be crossover and dependencies. Yes, that would be great if you'd like to support getting that together, Corey. Really appreciate that.
I think there's a hand raised from John.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. This is John Metzger calling from, or joining from Indiana. I just wanted to support Corey in that, similar to him, you know, we have a lot of ideas and we talk a lot. As a commercial provider, we're really appreciative of all the academic work that's been done over many years. We have a real challenge in that we are contacted every day by people who are needful or in search of early warning systems from a very local level to regional and national scale. And we're really excited to participate with the group to see where this goes. Our interest is in trying to find the relationship between the academic base, the foundation from all this work over the years, and where this is moving forward. Because on our side, it's a part of our business and we have to produce products and services. We're ready to engage anyone to discuss. We're available as a resource and we hope others will be. We have lots of questions that we'd like to pose as we see different sensor types become a larger part of the end product. That is a multi-sensor approach as opposed to traditionally maybe more vertical representation.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. I think a big question that I would pose to you all in that realm is where, you know, if a client comes to you and there isn't data available, where would you go first to get data? And, you know, especially if you're in a data poor setting, how do you start that approach and also have the communication with them about what data might be needed and what that might cost? I think that might be a really interesting discussion to have as part of this data review paper.
So if I may, to answer, we create it. We use whatever resources we can globally from repositories like the ESA, Sentinel, Copernicus mission, and others. It's changing every day. We get client inputs. We beg, borrow, sometimes not steal. We are more and more seeing the integration of terrestrial and satellite together. And I think this is a dynamic market with so much potential.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. I thought Hakan had his hand up. I don't know if he still has a point to make.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, I have a couple of remarks and questions actually to all of us. Let's say we already have a repository for, let's say, rainfall triggered landslide. NASA has such a repository, and also USGS has a repository for earthquake triggered landslides. So first of all, are we planning to combine these inventories on another platform? And this is one question. On the other hand, regarding some of the remarks, let's say, yeah, each inventory has its own characteristics and the different information. But I think that the key is if you have a good structure we can have place to store each different kind of inventory. Let's say the USGS inventory, the repository, developed for event inventories. And I remember, actually Kate knows these things much better than me, but I remember that there were some researchers, they would like to contribute to the repository with different kind of inventors, like in Italian guys, they have a national scale data sets for earthquake triggered landslides, but they are not event inventories, just some, you know, landslide points associated with some earthquake. So we couldn't use those inventories. We couldn't put them, share them as a part of the repository because the structure was not suitable. So if you have a nice structure and if we identify the metadata, etc., properly, there will be place for all of them. And maybe one last thing, let's say the inventories. Let's say today there are really large number of landslide data set, let's say in GNS in New Zealand or Japanese the repository. I mean, national repositories are really rich, but I think we should find a way to get in touch with them and invite them into this effort, because it is quite important. If they couldn't be part of it, I mean, we really need to reach out those data sets as well. They would really contribute a lot, I believe. So it might be a plan or an idea to find a way to get in.
Those are excellent points, and we purposely didn't put the links to the system that we've developed at NASA as well as USGS, but we can do that in the chat just kind of as examples. But I think this idea that, you know, how can we reach out to maybe those groups that have been compiling inventories to participate, with an understanding that not all data can be shared, but even if we have information on the metadata that then people can identify what's available or what could be available, I think that would also kind of start the conversation as well, in terms of kind of gathering this information from around the world, which is quite a challenge.
Yeah, and I think as Dalia and I were talking in the weeks leading up to this, we weren't sure that it was necessarily whether the government institutions in the U.S. should be hosting this kind of a global effort, although we are already, and to some extent, doing that in different ways. Hakan mentioned the earthquake-triggered repository, and then there's Cooler, NASA's landslide inventory, and the USGS has a just within the U.S. landslide inventory, and I know, you know, seeing people on the list. Switzerland has a national landslide inventory. Hakan mentioned Italy. Different countries have this, and so we thought maybe, you know, maybe one approach moving forward would be not necessarily to have a new database, but a link to, or a centralized link to access data, so that people who are interested in seeing what is available globally, what are people doing what are researchers doing in different countries, would be able to have a centralized access point for that, and also access to the metadata to really see what's going on. So that was kind of our thinking about that, and I see a number of hands coming up now. So I'll turn it over to Dalia to manage that.
Sure, Adityan, your thoughts?
Yes, Dr. Dalia. So, adding to Dr. Hakan's comments on the inventory, so there was a publication by Dr. Tanyas on the completeness of the inventories, the kind of lands inventories that we have to create. Is it the point based or the polygon based, or, you know, the quality of the inventories also matter. Now the earthquake induced inventories that are hosted on the USGS websites, they clearly say how they were compiled, what are the the methodology. Was it fully automated, semi-automated, manually done? So we need to be sure how reliable these inventories are. I think Dr. Hakan is an expert in that. I'm merely a student of his work. So if we can have a charted out way of ruling out duplicate data sets, ruling out unreliable inventories, ruling out many things that will not matter when we go ahead to early one landslides. So if we can categorize the inventories very clearly and associate the properties that are required to analyze these kind of inventories, then we would be headed towards a global data set. That's just a point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'm going to pitch that question and over to Hakan, who has quite some experience in this, for his thoughts, if any. Hakan, would you like to comment?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, but the thing is, it is actually it was the initial idea while we are gathering the earthquake triggered landslide inventories. Let's develop a system to somehow evaluate the quality and completeness level of inventories. But in the end, we are asking people to share their data set with us, and for some reason, I mean, some fellows may need to develop quickly an inventory for the initial landslide hazard assessment, and the quality might be low, but still it is valuable. So, and labeling them as low quality, high quality might be not a good approach, or that's why actually we didn't do it. But we have methods, let's say, also in terms of quality. Fausto Guzzetti has many papers describing the methods and how it should be, etc., etc. So I think instead of labeling them, we can point out the reliable methods, or maybe we can end up with a report or paper, something emphasizing those things again. But I think there are already enough papers on it. But other than that, if we have clear metadata for inventories, that will be valuable, and to some extent it will be enough, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Hakan. I think that was kind of a little bit of the point that Dalia and I were trying to get at, as far as the both of having a benchmark data sets where there are certain standards that are met without necessarily implying that anything that doesn't meet those is not valuable. All data is potentially very valuable, even if it's, a landslide happened this week in this general area. That can be useful for developing a landslide warning system, as opposed to something with precise minute by minute landslide reporting. And so, yeah, just having clear standards for metadata, and then also kind of some data sets that would be kind of ideal or good enough to test any sort of approach, whether that's at high temporal resolution, high spatial resolution, etc. But thanks for that reminder about just the importance of metadata.
And I think, as we said, we have some examples. And so if you're interested in engaging more on this topic, the benchmarks dataset group will really explore kind of metadata needs and how we can fuse together some of these efforts. Our landslide catalog at NASA has certain categories that we try to define, accuracy, and the U.S. landslide inventory that Ben's has worked on has a different method. So I think that is kind of what we were hoping to get at in this subgroup discussions on these data sets. I see John has his hand up. I don't know if you had another comment.
No, I'm sorry.
All right. Well, no problem. Well, feel free. So please continue to raise your hand if you're interested. So, one of the things that I think we wanted to talk about is, the logistics of kind of what the participation and expectations are. And, we have a great turnout today, and we hope that there's others listening on the recording, and we invite them to participate in the Google spreadsheet as well. We'll make sure that all the links are available. But fundamentally, we want to talk about kind of the role of associates and active participants versus observers, and maybe those that want to keep informed but don't want to have a more active role. Both are completely welcome. But I think that if you are interested in being active, again, we really encourage you to go to the Google link and include your interest. And the hope is that we will really have kind of monthly or similar cadence conversations led by many of you to move this forward. And so the hope is that there will be concrete contributions in terms of developing products, in terms of writing, in terms of researching, whatever you think you can provide. But we really want to keep this as a very active group. But if you aren't ready, I think that being an observer is also welcome. And so the plan is we will have about quarterly calls such as this that update on the progress of the sub working groups and some of the. I think in the future we could welcome some speakers to talk about new initiatives in this space. I know that there's a couple that might be interested in kind of providing short briefings. And so that would be the quarterly calls activity. And then also giving kind of broader feedback. Are we missing things? How should we be able to move this forward? So, so are there any questions about kind of associate and active participants versus observers? And then please indicate your interest in the Google Doc. Any questions there or comments?
I'll just say I do see people filling stuff in, which is great. Thank you so much. I know everyone's kind of in the world of multitasking right now. And again, who knows what time zone you're in. Yeah, I think, Dahlia, we didn't have in the spreadsheet, which you just mentioned, is speakers who would it be useful to have kind of at the monthly or quarterly academic or industry speakers, give kind of a short 15 or 30-minute presentation. And if so, we'll be happy to take suggestions, and we can even reach out to people if on behalf of LandAware, if that's something you've really wanted to see someone present, you could go ahead and put that. There's additional columns in that Google spreadsheet, so you can make whatever other comments you'd like in there. And I think, for the most part, we've gone through a lot of what we wanted to discuss today. I'm just kind of looking in at the Google Doc and seeing things fill in. People are talking about some of the knowledge gaps that we can address together. I think that's wonderful. What kind of data infrastructure or data needs would be good. I think we've got our work cut out for us. So again, just to reiterate what Dahlia said, we're really hoping to keep this active and involved. So we'll keep prodding and moving things forward.
And so if there aren't any more hands raised, I'm going to take this opportunity, and again, please continue our conversation both on the spreadsheet and in chat, etc. I wanted to try to give kind of an overview of one of the efforts that this working group is coming into, if that's okay. And so I'm actually going to share my screen if that's okay, Ben. I'll take it from you. And so what I wanted to do briefly is just give 5 minutes or more or less on an activity that we have that's dovetailing with this effort from the Committee on Earth Observing Satellites. And so many of you, including Corey and Jean-Philippe and Olivier and others, are part of this effort already. But I wanted to make the community aware of this as it's just starting, and it's kind of quite closely connected with the LandAware network. And so the Committee on Earth Observing Satellites, can you see my slides?
It's just a blank screen on my end. I don't know if anyone else can see.
Oh, goodness. Okay, let me just try sharing once more. All right. Did that work this time? It might be slow.
It might be too flashy an image for us.
Oh, I don't know.
Is anyone else
right, well,
screen or?
Yeah, it's black.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just try sharing once more and I will figure out. And if not, I can just give the update verbally. So here we go. We'll try this way and see if it works. And so the goal here is, okay, how about that? If not, no worries. No? Okay, no problem. I'll just speak to it. And I'm going to share the slides then as well. But so the Committee on Earth Observing Satellites is a group of the different space agencies around the world and some other partners. And the goal is to demonstrate effective uses of remote sensing data in different areas. There's a disaster working group, and as part of that working group, several of us are leading a landslide demonstrator. It was a pilot for about 4 years, and now as of this month, we're moving into a demonstrator phase for the next 3 years. And so the goals of this demonstrator are threefold. There's going to be 3 different projects that some have already started, some are just starting. And so the first is looking at how we can use remote sensing data along to assess landslide and deformational hazards along road networks, transportation corridors, and pipelines. And so this is work that Jean-Philippe Millet and Corey from BGC and others are leading. And so the goal is to bring together both engineers, geologists, infrastructure managers, companies, academics to really develop uses of INSAR and other methodologies, share best practices to really drive what is the cutting edge of using remote sensing data to look at kind of both slow moving and rapidly moving landslide hazards along transportation corridors. The second application is looking at disaster risk financing. So how can we use different tools to really look at this concept? And so we have a project led by others working in Clément from Taranam, and I think we have representation here, as well as Jean-Philippe and us and others, that's starting to explore how to take remote sensing and in situ data with additional economic data to kind of figure out how to better characterize disaster risk financing for the World Bank. But then the third project that is most relevant for us is advancing Earth Observatory-based landslide inventories for extreme forcing events, and that includes high rainfall as well as high magnitude earthquakes. And so the leads here are Olivier DeWitt from RMCA, as well as myself and Jean-Philippe. And so the goal is really to test out different types of remote sensing data, including SAR, synthetic aperture radar, optical information, and to share modeling potentially in terms of machine learning tools or open data used to really develop inventories, as well as monitor progress in landslides as well. And so I bring this up because we're just starting that. And if this is something you're interested in, please contact me. Or you can put it in the chat and we'd be happy to rope you in. We haven't really started calls on any of these specifically yet, but the teams are just forming. And so I just wanted to make you aware of that, since this landslide early warning system data effort really is directly related on purpose to the third topic in CIAS. So in this CIAS effort. So I guess I'll pause there. I think that's all I had to say. And I'll put the link to the CIAS webpage if you want to explore more about this effort. And if there's any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Dalia. Yeah, and from the looks of what people have filled in the spreadsheet, it does seem like you'll have some interest in that and certainly overlap with what we're talking about. So that's great. We're getting close to an hour, and we'd kind of budgeted an hour and a half, but hoping that we'd stick to an hour. I just wanted to open it up if there's anything else that we as co-chairs of the working group or can facilitate or help that we're kind of missing overall as far as the structure and objectives. Now is your kind of time to chime in via I was gonna say in person via the video chat, but otherwise we can follow up via email and again the spreadsheet. So if there's anything else, now's your time. Otherwise, I'd like to really thank everyone for taking the time and being together today and get this working group kicked off. And we're looking forward to really great engagement and working with all of you in the future.
And in terms of the next steps, we will reconvene this group as a whole group in 3 months' time. But in the meantime, we're going to take the input from the spreadsheet, and we'll give time to those that haven't been able to be here in person and maybe are viewing the recording to provide their input as well. And then we'll be contacting each of those subgroups, people that have showed interest in those subgroups, and start to form teams that can meet more regularly. Again, this is a working group, so we really encourage you to have active participation and encourage leadership. All of this is best effort. All of this is pro bono to a certain extent. And so so we recognize that your time is highly valuable, and any way that we can make this process more efficient, we welcome thoughts and additional leadership on that topic. All right. So again, continue to fill out the Google Excel spreadsheet. It will stay open. If you feel as if others didn't know about this but should, you're welcome to send it to them. We will be posting this recording, we hope, on the LandAware website in our subgroup, in our working group folder, as well as the notes. And then I think that we were going to keep this open for maybe another minute or two. If anyone wants to unmute and chat or provide any other thoughts, please do so. And we hope you're all well. All right.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Here.
Thanks, Al. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Dalia. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Mikael.
Michele, only one question. I don't remember what selection I did on the working groups as observer, active member, or whatever. This is somewhere available.
No, it's time for me also to say something about it. The selections that you did, all of you, not only you, Marcel, but all of you at the beginning by filling the form, they can be updated at any time. You can then decide, you contact Dalia and Ben, you can put in CC me or whoever, it's dynamic. This thing is, it's pro bono. Everybody's working for fun and for free, for like contributing to this collective wisdom, whatever way we're gonna call it. So yes, you can update it. I don't remember it now, but we can, as Dalia mentioned, she's running this meeting and this working group together with Ben. Even if you are not here today, but you are listening to this later on, because we will put this on the web relatively soon, feel free to contact all of us and change. And then if you want to know, tell me privately, I tell you where you are now.
Yeah, I think just to chime in, I know when I signed up, I may have been slightly optimistic about how much free time I had for this, and there are probably others too. But I think what Dalia and I, essentially by having this sign up, is we would like to kind of identify who's going to be active based on their interest and contribution, not necessarily on what you ticked in a box. And that, as Michele said, can kind of evolve and be updated as needed. So thanks for organizing that.
And as Dalia and Ben are setting this up, even the recording will be open to everybody also, outside the group. So, it's something that we will try to keep everywhere throughout the working groups in LandAware as open as possible. We are not trying to set up small niches of people meeting internally. Thank you. We cannot hear you, Dalia. If you're talking final words, we cannot hear you.
Trying to make sure that the children don't come in. Thank you very much to everybody. And we look forward to talking with us. I think there's a lot of opportunity here to work across networks. I see at least 10 countries represented just in our participants already. And so we're really excited about the international scope of this work. So thank you again. And we will talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. See you soon.